Hello and welcome to the Kidney Ally Nutrition Podcast, the one and only podcast where we tackle the hardest questions around what constitutes a good, healthy kidney diet. Whether you're a patient, a carer, a nephrologist, or a dietitian, I'm sure you'll learn something new today about what constitutes a good, healthy kidney diet. Hey guys, welcome to the Kidney Ally Nutrition Podcast. I'm Carl Juresic, your co-host and co-founder of Kidney Ally. Pass on to my other co-host.
And I'm Ruth Kander, also co-founder of Kidney Ally. And we're here today to talk about salt.
Salt, a common enemy that I never thought I'd have when I was younger. I really loved salt when I was growing up. I remember it could have led to me getting CKD or moving first from my kidney disease, not knowing, because I used to eat in Australia when I was growing up, like olives, like jars of olives and pickles and, tomato paste on bread was a very family tradition, pizzas, McDonald's, lots of terrible food, thinking of like a classic 90s child diet. But now with a kidney transplant, I've obviously realized how bad salt can be for your kidneys. So what we're really trying to tackle today is some demystification around salt, what you should think about as a patient with salt, and how you should modify your diet accordingly. But in the first section, just getting some knowledge on salt and the body from Ruth. Probably the first question around, what is salt in regards to a thing you eat, and how does that interact with your body? So like, what is salt generally, and then when you eat it, what happens inside your body?
So obviously salt is used for multiple things. It's used as a flavoring and as a preservative for food. So a lot of sort of preserved food has got a lot of salt in it. Salt can do a few things to your body actually, and I think we're learning more and more, and I don't think not everything is well established, but in terms of blood pressure, it can affect blood pressure, make blood pressure go high if you have a tendency to it, or in older age. And it can also cause your body to retain water. So again, if you've got heart problems or kidney problems, then it can cause your body to retain water even more than it would do with those medical problems. And there is some theories that salt can damage the inside of blood vessels, so arteries and veins, but that's not as well established. But salt really does affect the whole body and does do lots of things, but we're not exactly sure. More than that, making the blood pressure go high and retaining fluid and some vessel damage, we're not sure of other things. But we do know that people eat a lot of salt, and we should be reducing our salt intake.
So when it comes to like in a kidney diet, it seems like a lot of doctors say reduce salt, reduce salt, reduce salt. Why do they say reduce salt?
Because blood pressure management in chronic kidney disease is so paramount and so essential to managing kidney disease that they don't want you to have any extra salt in the diet, because they don't want your blood pressure to go up. So if you've got normal blood pressure and and it's completely stable, you don't need any medicines whatsoever, then maybe it's not as crucial as someone with high blood pressure who is on a variety of medications to manage their kidney disease. But it's all about the blood pressure, because the higher your blood pressure, the more damage it's going to do to your kidneys. I find it amazing how quickly high blood pressure can get damage to your kidneys. If you've got high blood pressure for 5 years, that's it, and you don't know about it, your kidneys are gone. They're completely damaged within 5 years, which is really quick. Yeah. Really quick. I've seen people say to me, oh yeah, the GP told me my blood pressure was a bit high a few years ago, and then they're on dialysis. Yeah. So really, sure, if you're above, I would say above the age of 20 and you're healthy, just make sure that you're, check your blood pressure every 6 months or yearly, just make sure it's within the normal range. And I know for myself, and I don't have kidney disease, I always had really low blood pressure. And now in the last few years, my blood pressure has definitely gone up, and I'm definitely trying, to be more careful and to watch it, because I'm scared, I don't want to get high blood pressure and therefore kidney disease. So do watch it.
So, and then the other point you mentioned before around retaining fluid, does that have something to do with the kidneys as well? So if you're eating, say, like a really salty jar of olives, which is really salty, and then your body, is it because your kidneys aren't processing the salt that you're getting the retaining of fluid, and is the retaining of fluid bad? What happens in your body?
I think because the body is retaining the salts, it retains the fluids as well. It draws it in, and therefore you retain fluid. But I think it's only really at the much later stages, so probably CKD 4 or 5, that you do that. But if you've got heart failure as well, or heart problems, then that's a consideration as well, and that can happen at CKD 2 or 3 much earlier, because if the heart is not pumping properly around the blood around the body, then you retain water as well. So I think it's that the salt, because the salt that you eat gets retained, so it draws in the fluid and makes you retain fluids, and that's why it's so important not to have too much salt.
And does it get retained because your kidneys aren't working, or does it get retained because you're just eating a significant amount of it?
It's the salt. Again, if your kidneys aren't working, it's more the later stages that the kidneys are not getting rid of the fluid. So stage 4 and 5, but stage 2 and 1, 2, 3, it's more because the salt is drawing the water in and preventing your body from getting rid of it.
Okay, gotcha. So is there anything positive that salt does for the body, or if it's possible to never recommend for anyone to eat salt?
Well, I don't think it's possible to never have any at all. I think that's quite difficult, and you've got to be, like superhuman, I think, to not have any salt whatsoever. But I think that you do need salt. You do need salt for electrolyte balance and balancing the body and making sure everything's working properly. But you don't need as much, I think, as modern day people are eating, because I think we're all, maybe not so much the CKD population, because they've kind of been educated to have more fresh foods and less processed food. But I think as a general wider sort of population, I think a lot of people eat ready-made food, and ready-made food is automatically going to have quite a lot of salt in it, because it's going to, so that it's tasty and so that it lasts longer as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And then, so an average person, how much salt should they be having a day? And then based on that amount there, should a kidney patient be having like half that amount or a quarter of that amount? And where's the ballpark recommendation?
So the government guidelines are 5 to 6 grams a day of salt, which is about a teaspoonful, which sounds not so much, but it's quite a lot. And in terms of a kidney patient, I would say if you can do 3 grams a day, 2.5 to 3 grams a day, I think you'd be doing really well. And a lot of the information is saying that if you have freshly cooked food and try to have as little packaged food or takeaway food or restaurant food as possible, you're going to automatically get to that level anyway. So that's quite encouraging.
Again, so we just talked about having 6 grams of salt a day, which I'm sure would be a lot more from an average person. And a CKD patient should really try and reduce that by half. But when you're cooking at home, I think it's very difficult to kind of measure every day how much that is, especially because most packaging has sodium as opposed to salt. So that's probably the first question in regards to packaging is, what is the difference between salt and sodium, or are they the same thing?
Yeah, well, salt is actually sodium chloride. The sort of table salt is sodium chloride, and sodium is just sodium, so it's not got a chloride attached. So it's slightly different. So if you're looking at packaging, anything that is 0.3 or 4 grams per 100 grams of salt per 100 grams of food is going to be high. And if it's 0.6 grams of sodium per 100 grams of food, then that is very high. I think most places in the world now are trying to list it as salt and not sodium. And I think, certainly in the UK, and in the UK, we've got this whole traffic light system. In America, I think they do actually use maybe sodium, but they put it at a percentage of the daily intake. So you really want that to be as low as possible, and you want it to be, I think if 0.6 grams of sodium per 100 grams of food is high, then you probably want it to be also less than 0.3 or 0.1.
Yeah, I think it's really like
0.1 will be 100 milligrams per 100 grams of food. So that, you just want it to be as low as possible. But I think I always say to people, if you're eating mostly, freshly cooked foods, to have the occasional high salt foods is probably not the end of the world. You may feel it in whatever way, because I've noticed on our Facebook group, some people say that they actually feel it when they had something salty, they really feel it. I don't know what that means. I know if I've had a takeaway, which is quite rare, I'm really thirsty afterwards, but I think just see how you go. But if you're mostly having fresh food, won't worry too much about it, but just try and keep to the point, to the 2.5 to 3 grams a day, or 2,500 milligrams of sodium a day.
Yeah, I think that, and it's a good thing to, like, because we have so many different countries that join the group and listen to the podcast, that having a look at the labels is really important, understanding them in your culture. And the closer you can get to zero, the better. And just understanding what those grams or ounces or whatever it is means, and the lower you can get, the better. And look at sodium or salt as well. And then, so in regards to your bloods that you might get, this was a big insight that I found when speaking to Ruth, is sodium or salt that you get in your blood test doesn't correlate to what you eat, which is huge, because I thought, actually, if that's reducing, then I'm eating less salt. So just a clarification that the way to measure is really difficult to measure, because it's literally what you put in your mouth, not what the blood results say. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the only way to measure dietary sodium intake is urinary sodium. So doing a 24-hour urine collection and then measuring the salt in there is the only way to measure dietary sodium, or to do a really strict food diary using something quite reliable like Chronometer or Carbs and Cows or something like that. That's 1,000,000%. That is very, very reliable. I think, most doctors won't want to measure urinary sodium or 24-hour urine unless they're looking for something specific. Like sometimes people want to see what your 24-hour urine output is, so they'll ask you to measure it in that capacity, but very unlikely to measure it unless they think you've got some syndrome. There are certain syndromes of salt associated with salt, which is quite complicated, so I'm not going to get into now. But yeah, and then serum sodium is really is mostly a reflection of your hydration status. So if your sodium is high, above the normal range, it's more than likely you're dehydrated. If it's really, really low, then you're overhydrated. And a good example of that is, I saw a lady privately, or I had a conversation with her. I hadn't seen her actually. I had a conversation with her about seeing her privately, and I was trying to sort something out for her. And then she said to me that she was in hospital with a sodium of 130, which is very low. And she was a patient, a polycystic kidney disease patient on the medicine tolvaptan, where you have to drink quite a lot of water. I think about 4 liters a day. She was drinking 6 to 8 liters a day. So she'd overloaded herself, and that's what caused the low sodium level. So just be really careful. If you're on tolvaptan or that medicine for polycystic kidney disease, really check with your healthcare provider how much water you should drink. I think it's 3 to 4 liters a day. Don't go over that, because going over that is going to do you more harm than good. Okay. And then if you're not on that and you're just a CKD patient, drink till your urine is clear, and that's usually about 2.5 to 3 liters a day. Also depends on your body size. If you're a tiny person of 40 kilos, you probably don't need more than 1.5 liters a day. So just be careful.
Yeah, I think that balance of water, of salt, is really important as well. Just drink lots of water, but maybe not 10 liters, but just at least drink lots of water. Keep common sense.
Yeah.
And then probably moving on from labels onto actually foods themselves is, I think the key is to get into the behavior of just defaulting to foods with close to no sodium, like fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, and you know, cooking at home, because as soon as you go to takeaway meals, ready to go meals, they're just going to be massively huge in sodium. So that's probably foods people can avoid or eat less frequently.
Yeah.
But is there particular foods people should avoid that are really, really, really high in sodium, like olives or other ones?
Yeah, so any pickled food, so olives are pickled, cucumbers, onions, gherkins, that kind of thing. And then cured meat, so smoked meat, or you know, like sausages, breakfast salami, and then smoked haddock, smoked salmon, that kind of thing will be really salty. And then also thinking about, you know, packaged snacks, they're really salty, like crisps and salted peanuts and salted nuts and that kind of, you know, salted crackers. Anything like that is going to be really salty, so just be careful. One thing to note, and this sounds crazy and I've really never got my hand around it, there are some vegetables with natural sodium. So for example, someone highlighted to me this, and I didn't know this, and it was somebody who came to me because they had tinnitus, which is ringing in the ears, and for some people they need a very low salt diet as well in this condition. And this person said to me that their doctor told them not to have carrots. And I said to them, really? And I looked up sodium in carrots, and it's got a little bit of sodium. I mean, I wouldn't have thought it's enough to not have them, but just be aware. So there are some, and I guess it's to do with the soil as well that they're grown in. So just be aware, but that's not something you need to consider. You don't need to go that far. It's more about the processed food, the salty food, and the ready-made food, and putting salt in cooking. It's more about that than anything else.
Yeah, I think that one big area that I changed that really helped was cutting out like cured meats. That was a huge one because I used to eat a lot of that. And olives and pickles was a big one. And yeah, when you're cooking, just try not to add a lot of salt into it, or almost no salt, and use just natural flavors to increase that. And I think that's one thing that people that have naturally eaten a lot of salt go to, is they're missing that salty flavor. So is there other things that people can use in their cooking to get salt or that savory type flavor so it doesn't taste so bland?
So I think look, I think things like pasta, rice, potatoes, quite difficult to cook them and not have any salt at all. So I say put a little bit in. But there are salt substitutes, but I have to admit, I don't really recommend them for kidney patients because they're essentially potassium chloride, and that makes me very nervous that it will make potassium levels go up. Even if they normal, it makes me worried that they'll go up anyway, because it's potassium salt essentially. But there's I think it's adjusting your palate. And I think the first 2 weeks is really hard to adjust your palate, and then you just can't eat any salty foods anyway. So that works quite well. And I think using more the herbs and the spices and mint, all sorts of mint and garlic and paprika and all those kind of and herb blends, I think is the best thing you can do to help yourself. People have mentioned some non-potassium salt substitutes on the group that we have, Kidney Ally Facebook, but I'm not sure about them. I'm not familiar with them. I don't know much about them. There was one that was green. I can't remember what it's called. I don't know if you remember.
Dash is the one that people go nuts about. Is that?
Yeah. I mean, we've got no affiliation to Mrs. Dash at all, but yeah, it looks like the Mrs. Dash ones without salt. There's loads of them. I think they're good. They seem good. I need to get some actually to use them, but I think they're good. I would go for that. Or low sodium stock cubes, like a lot of the baby stock cubes, or things to make baby food. Flavorings don't have much salt in them, so that's a good one. And also some of the baby or the little toddler snacks don't have any salt in them at all. So they might be a little bit high potassium actually, because they're like vegetable-y snacks. But if you're CKD 2, 3A, you should be fine with that. And then no salts, that's brilliant for you.
Yeah, I think that I back the low sodium stock cubes. Being someone that doesn't eat meat, I use the vegetable stock cubes, and I was so surprised how I had pretty much no salt in them, and I was able to make really nice risotto or really nice soups with that, which you can get the salt hit. And similar to, as you mentioned, after I switched my diet from I think I was probably having maybe above average salt to close to no salt, I've just massively stocked up my seasonings. So things like garlic powder, onion powder, mustard powder, cumin, paprika, herbs. And then one thing I found that has loads of flavor that pretty much don't need salt for is fresh herbs. So when you have the bottled herbs, they're very good for, curries, or like if you're making maybe some vegetables and stuff. But then as soon as if you have fresh parsley or fresh mint or fresh basil, you don't need to have salt because there's so much flavor in there that has zero salt, super healthy, and add them into a salad instead of salt, and you'll get that kind of taste and that flavor that you need. And it's 1,000 times healthier for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, agree with that. I think that's great. I think it's just adjusting and finding what you like best. Everyone is different. Everyone's got different tastes, different cultures, different cuisines. It's just adjusting what you're doing, cutting down on the salt, and finding the flavors that you love best. I think if I serve my family things with parsley all over it, I think they throw it at me. But I think garlic and onion powder would be much more acceptable to them. So I think it's finding what you like and using that.
Yeah, and like kind of go into recipes that you liked particularly, or you cook for your family or cook for yourself or your friends, and then just try and find a substitute. So I always, whenever I open a Jamie Oliver book or an Ottolenghi book and they use salt, I just don't put salt in, and I might put some extra garlic, or I might put some paprika or something like that, or garlic powder, because then it kind of adds that the flavor that would have been there, and my tongue has adjusted to not having that much salt. There are times that it's frustrating sometimes for family members that do want to have that salt, but you can always tell them to add salt on the top as well. And there's a lot of I actually found with tomato sauce or ketchup that now there's options for almost close to zero salt. It's a bit sugary, but you can still get that flavor. And it just, to Ruth's point, it takes a few weeks to get over that point. But experiment, try and make stuff. The fresher it is, the less salt there's going to be, and maybe just slowly reduce yourself off having 4 takeaways a week to 3 to 2, then 1, and then maybe once a fortnight, and you'll be kicking goals that way. Avoid Ruth's point, like on the go food, because the more prepackaged it is, the higher the chance. And also beware of like fads, because I think we get a lot of questions in the group around, is sea salt different to regular salt, or is Himalayan salt different to this salt, or I found this salt is different. Salt is salt, and salt is salt. So there is no fake salt. It's going to be salt.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's this thing about Himalayan salt, how it's amazing for you, and it's so healthy. It's really not. It's so expensive. Salt, like Carl just said, salt is salt. You want to use it, use cheap, regular table cheap salt, and use a tiny bit if you must, but I promise you, if you go with very little salt and cut it down gradually, it takes 2 weeks. That's it. It's the same with sugar as well. It takes 2 weeks. If you avoid sugary foods for 2 weeks, after that your taste buds change really quickly. You won't want it or need it or crave it at all.
It almost tastes it's almost repulsive after a while, when you have like I remember I had some crisps or chips like after, and you taste that salt, you're like, oh my god, this is very salty, but before you chuck down the whole packet in 5 minutes. So I think that it's balancing it out. And then if you're cooking, we find a lot of people join the group cooking for others, maybe slowly change it for your husband or your partners, cooking over time, and then eventually their taste buds will slowly change. And if you do it instantly, they're not going to like it, but do it slowly over time.
Yeah.
But I think that's everything we have on the key questions on salt and sodium and being careful on that. You should definitely check out all our previous podcasts. We cover a topic each time, and check out our website, kidneyally.com. Sign up to there to get more notifications, or join our Facebook group. It's one of the biggest ones now on Facebook. Kidney disease and recipe and diet ideas. You'll see a big salmon in the middle. Check it out, ask some questions, free recipes on there, and catch you next time.
Bye for now.